Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 20, Economic, Social and Cultural Dimensions of Globalization, we are discussing social dimensions of globalization. And our topic is feminization of labor. Women have entered the labor force in large numbers in countries that have embraced liberal economic policies. Industrialization in the context of globalization is as much female-led as it is export-led. The overall economic activity rate of women for the age group of 20 to 54 approached 70% in 1996. The highest absorption of women has been witnessed in the export-oriented industrial sector. This is especially the case in the export processing zone and special economic zone and in those labor-intensive industries that have relocated to developing countries in search of cheap labor. Investors have demonstrated a preference for women in the soft industries such as apparel, shoes, and toy making, data processing, and semiconductor assembling industries that require unskilled to semi-skilled labor. Nevertheless, this did not ensure a better status for women in any way. The informal sector, where women were absorbed in large numbers along with the globalization, offer very poor labor conditions. Such industries where women were mostly engaged happen to be highly labor intensive, service oriented, and poorly paid. In many countries, workers in the export processing zone find unionization and collective bargaining nearly impossible. In call centers in India, women comprise an estimated 40% of the workforce. Now let us move to the next point, that is poverty. Opening up of the economies was primarily visualized as a mechanism where trade would function as an engine of growth, and the fruits of growth would trickle down to the poor. However, the results have been mixed, with many countries observing widening inequalities in their economies, contrary to the conventional trade theory prescription. The internationalization of trade has opened up vistas for globalization of production, creating profound changes in the labor market, such as the widening wage disparity, increasing contractualization of work, skill-based segregation of work, etc. The globalization and liberalization policies resulted in improving more and more people of the lower strata the world around. Industrialization and genetic engineering of food and globalization of trade in agriculture accelerated poverty in the agriculture-based nations of the world. The globalization of non-sustainable industrial agriculture adversely affected the incomes of the farmers of the developing and least developed countries through a combination of devaluation of currencies, increase in cost of production, and a collapse of commodity prices, all resulting from the liberalization of the economy in India. The first generation reforms concentrated on the industrial economy and agricultural and rural sector were neglected. In the urban sector, the large metropolitan cities are the most immediately affected from liberalization and globalization. with significant changes in land use and work patterns. The claims made in the beginning of the reforms that they are going to bring about employment growth does not seem to be true after studying the data for the post-reform period. Economic liberalization and globalization had a direct impact both on rural and urban poverty. Due to the reforms in the banking sector, substantial changes occurred in the institutional agreement for rural credit, a key factor in helping the poor to escape poverty. This has gone against the interests of the rural poor. The unsustainable development practices also lead to the impoverishment of the poor. The decline in social sector expenditure or stagnation in social sector expenditure in proportion to GDP also went against the interest of the poor. The urban areas, the large-scale private investment, both foreign and Indian, led to the acquisition of the city lands, which in turn affected the poor, mainly slum dwellers, hawkers, destitutes, and street dwellers, as they were pushed out of the city to the peripheries, which are marked by the degeneration with low value employment and poor living conditions. Now let us move to the next point, that is unsustainable development practices. Sustainable development is defined as the development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Under this definition, development is not just limited to economic growth, but is made to encompass environmental protection and an equitable distribution of wealth and resources with the goal of improving and raising the standards and quality of living for everyone. The development practices followed the world over during the globalization era, marked by a high level of market competitiveness, often seem to follow unsustainable development practices. For instance, in India, the replacement of native seeds by imported hybridized seeds or cash crops resulted in more and more exploitation of groundwater through tube wells, since these crops need more water. The overexploitation of the groundwater in turn resulted in depletion of the groundwater levels, leading to famines and poverty. The high-yielding hybrid seeds are vulnerable to pest attacks, resulting in more use of pesticides. The discriminate use of the chemical-based fertilizer, especially subsidized fertilizer, has created an imbalance between the essential mineral contents such as nitrogen and potassium. There is a growing realization of the degradation of land, water, and environment due to the current pattern of agricultural production and its sustainability among the people. The export-oriented policy of the Indian government in the fisheries sector opened up the waters of the exclusive economic zone to MNCs and TNCs for fish trawling. This resulted in the indiscriminate destruction of the marine ecosystem and the livelihood of the traditional fishing community. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.